Welcome, everyone, to another episode of IT Visionaries. And today we have one of the special roundtables. Joining us today, we have the VP of Engineering at Hashicorp, Preeti Somal. And with us as well is Mark Thiele. Mark, you are the CEO and founder of Edgevana. Welcome, Preeti. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having us. Happy to be here.
All right. So for any of our listeners who have not heard from you before or did not hear your original episodes, I'd love for you each to introduce yourselves and what you guys do. So I'm going to start with Preeti. Preeti, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let our audience know a little about Hashicorp and what you do there.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're here listening to us. I'm Preeti Somal, and I lead our engineering, security, and IT organizations here at Hashicorp. If you haven't heard about us, we are an infrastructure software company rooted in open source. We've got 8 open source projects now, ranging from Vagrant and Packer on the developer side to Terraform, Vault, Console, Nomad, and 2 recent additions, Waypoint and Boundary. And I'm sure you can check out more details, and we'll kind of talk through this a little bit as well today. And prior to Hashicorp, I've sort of spent my life in tech, working both on the side of the enterprise software companies, as well as a stint at Yahoo, where I was responsible for a lot of the developer productivity and sort of employee experience pieces. So really glad to be here talking through this topic today.
Mark.
Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Thiele. I'm CEO and founder of Edgevana. Edgevana is a company looking to effectively cloudify the acquisition and deployment, development of globally distributed technology solutions. So think of companies trying to deploy edge or trying to deploy systems that require data residency in countries all around the world, et cetera. We help companies achieve those kinds of activities. And my background has been one of a really kind of a love affair with the IT industry in general. If I had 3 legs, they would all be hip deep in cloud, edge computing, and infrastructure that includes everything all the way up to the physical building of the data center. I'm been hugely involved in the industry throughout my career, starting with Green Grid, I think was the first official organization I participated in. I founded a data center organization with my brother-in-law called Data Center Pulse, where we did sort of the equivalent of consumer reports type activities in the data center industry. And I was a part of IBM Cloud Mines for several years, on the board of CNCF, Cloud Native Compute Foundation. And I was the chair for the technical group at the International Data Center Authority. So, beyond that, a career helping companies like HP and VMware, where Preeti and I worked together for a little while, and a couple of other companies building out global infrastructure. Again, everything from data centers to cloud infrastructure, and over the last 5 years of my career before starting Edgevana, working on edge almost exclusively.
So for those of you listening, this is exactly why we brought these 2 people together. Preeti's, Mark's, both of their experiences span such a wide array of topics and subjects, but like at the core, you guys work on things that help make developers scale faster, right? Scale faster, move faster, get infrastructure up faster, which makes this subject so timely. So what's happening today right now is a lot of people are calling it the Great Resignation. What's happening is more people than ever are leaving their work, which is interesting because we came out of lockdown. Now everyone's leaving work, changing jobs. I don't know, people have reassessed their lives. I don't know exactly what the reasoning is, but what's playing a part that did not play a part in the past, not only is it about managers, work, work-life balance, but the toolkits people use, and some of and that is something that I don't think we've seen before. So the employee experience is now a big deal. Companies need to worry about their employee experience, and the employee experience typically centers around the toolkits that you have, and of course the work culture, but the tools are part of it. Preeti, I will start with you. What do you think is happening? How I would love to hear your perspective on what is happening. Does in regards to employee experience and the tooling that people have access to, what do you suspect is going on? I'd love to hear your perspective on why are so many people now changing jobs, and how much of this is a factor of selecting jobs? Like, oh, I'll work with you because you have the toolkit I more prefer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think of this problem in kind of two dimensions, right? One dimension is clearly just the remote culture, remote work, and the toolkit therein, right? So coming out of the pandemic, of course, people have recognized that remote can be done successfully. And that's something that for us at Hashicorp, we were built as remote first, and we've been really sort of fortunate to have been founded that way. But I think one dimension is certainly sort of individuals wanting to stay in a remote work environment and really looking for an optimal sort of approach that companies have found there. And then the second, and I think also very, very critical dimension is how difficult is it for me as an engineer to do my job? Am I able to kind of focus on building those scalable, secure experiences? Am I able to innovate rapidly? And the toolkits around, hey, I don't really care about secrets management, and can somebody stand up Vault for me and kind of deal with that and just make it happen? Or I don't really need to worry about my cloud identity and access management. I come into this company, I've got an SSO account. I just want to be able to deploy my code, right? Those are the kind of things where what we're seeing is the toolkit is becoming really, really critical. How quickly can I go from idea to actually having an alpha beta available in a way that can scale and is secure? And how does the environment I have within the company help me with that? So one of the patterns we've been seeing, honestly, for a few years is kind of this evolution of a platform builder developer persona that will take tools like the ones that HashiCorp builds and kind of set up these sort of guardrailed environments so that the developers don't need to worry about that. They're just sort of focusing on, I need to kind of build this app to do something, and that's all I'm going to do. So environments where it's easier for me to get my work done, the barrier to innovation is really low. Those are the attractive environments. That's what, in my mind, sort of the engineering community is really looking for.
No, I mean, I see it I feel like I see it all the time. And then Mark, a lot of your experiences have been working with some of the bigger customers. I'd love for you to share your perspective here, because a lot of companies, I know they want to move to this move fast, innovative place, right? But there's still definitely old guard CIOs, CTOs in place that want to put more controls. And the thought of someone running Terraform and spinning up an instance and building a code, even if it's a hypothesis, right? It's like a test to see, could this work better?
Right.
It kind of freaks them out. I know for a fact that a company down the road here in Raleigh, big tech company, more than 10,000 employees, they told me that if they want to set up an instance, they have to send in a support ticket, and the support ticket goes to their internal, whoever approves this. And then that person sets up the infrastructure so that this developer could possibly test whatever it is they're going to test. Right. What do you see happening there, Mark? Because there's certainly this drive for innovation, but there's also this I want to control everything. So they're at conflict with each other.
Yeah, and actually, sort of underlying the broader answer to your question, and I fully support everything that Preeti mentioned, is that this notion of control has been exacerbated by the fact that most of us would be leaders. And I say would be leaders because, frankly, if you're a leader, this isn't your problem because you don't have the issue of worrying about control of your staff. But for would-be leaders who were threatened in general in a traditional workplace, the idea of having a distributed workforce or a workforce that could make choices in real time well, frankly, scares the crap out of them, right? They want to know what the employee's doing. They want to know why the employee's doing it. They want to know what the employee's not doing. They want to know what the employee's doing that doesn't have anything to do with work. And they are neglecting the fact that the point of working remote, and I shouldn't say the point, a major point of working remote or working from anywhere is that life has always intruded on work. But depending on where you work, work has made it harder to have life or not. Does my boss care if I spend 15 minutes talking to the dry cleaner while I'm at the office? Does my boss care if I spend 15 minutes longer after lunch stopping by the car wash because I need my car washed because I'm taking my girlfriend out to dinner tonight or whatever the case may be? Life intrudes on work. The whole point for many people working remotely is to allow life to occur and to allow work to occur where life isn't intruding. And most people are very generous with that distribution. Most people are more than happy to put in more than the 8 or 9 or 10 hours that the average organization expects of them because of that assumed flexibility. And so when a manager or a leader decides to try to collapse that and say, no, we're taking your office and we're putting it in your home, and I'm putting a camera above your desk so I can keep an eye on what the hell you're doing all day long, that changes that dynamic. And so how does that relate to the bigger story of this resignation issue that you mentioned at the top of the show? Is that there are, and there is no single answer. There's a fine fabric that keeps different personalities doing or not doing what they do. And those bits of fabric can keep you doing something a little bit longer or make you quit a little bit faster. But if you really don't like your boss or some of the people you work with, but you have a really good friend in the office and there's a foosball table you get to use every now and then, that might keep you on the job a few more months, might even keep you on the job another year, especially if the job market's that great. But if you don't have those things, if those things aren't tying you to the actual workplace anymore because you're working remote, then all of a sudden other things take on even more importance. Like I could put up with a slow load of the ERP system that I'm in for 6 hours out of 8 all day long. I could put up with having to go through a change control committee for releasing a container into production when I had all of those other things. But when I don't, those become the only thing I have to focus on. Right.
No, that's it. So I've seen that firsthand, by the way. What, yeah, it's fine to say. So my wife used to work for one of the big four. If anyone wants to look her up, you can figure out which one of the big four accounting firms it is. You got a 25% chance of guessing it. If you go on LinkedIn, you have a 100% chance of getting it. But when she didn't work, at the time, she wasn't working in the office because it wasn't remote work, but she just didn't go in that day and she was going to log in. Well, she had to go VPN and route her way into the office in Raleigh, which then went to a central file storage. Like, so they didn't use, so Preeti, you're going to roll your eyes. They didn't use like a public cloud document storage system. They used an internal tool. And this server, maybe it was in New York. I have no idea. So the way she was working on a file was through VPN into the office in North Carolina, up to New York, working on an Excel file where, and like, I would be there and watching her open it. She would open it, click open and go like make coffee. I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, it's not going to open for at least 10 minutes. I was like, I cannot believe this is actually modern. What year are we in? Like, can't be possible.
Yeah.
There are companies still doing that. How,
Yep.
what Preeti, why are these companies not transforming faster?
You know, I feel like any logical, reasonable person is kind of wanting to transform, right? I think change is hard, and how can we help with that change? One piece that's really clear is that the transformation has definitely become a higher priority because of this Great Resignation, because of the remote work piece. And for companies to thrive, they have to change. We are finding that really sort of starting to think about that change in phases and embrace sort of the cloud pieces and do that thoughtfully, where you've got sort of tooling that does help you secure, does help you put in the policies and the guardrails, right? And this is where we see a lot of customers of ours kind of using products like Terraform and Vault and Console for network security, et cetera. It's possible. You just have to start. You have to kind of make that first step. And, Albert and Mark, it's going to be really interesting. Is this Great Resignation going to be, yet another sort of trigger point that expedites that transformation, right? We see there's a very clear skills shortage as well. So if I'm on the other side, if I'm the engineer and, I'm not feeling productive, why would I stay? There's like no shortage of sort of places I can go to and feel like I'm having the impact that I would want to have, right?
Yeah. And that's a common thing among engineers is they want to build. They want to build and build great things. They don't want to, no one wants to be part of a process. Even our flagship sponsor. This is actually true of every position, I feel like, because one of the things you'll hear about the great sales reps is they constantly say, I don't want to spend my time updating Salesforce. I want to be talking to customers, solving problems, closing deals. And depending on someone's requirements of them, like they might spend their whole day like, hey, I need you to log every call. I need you to record these things. I need you. It's like you get so stuck and pulled into, like, I call it administrating the administration. It's like, you want me to spend most of my time, give you information just so you know what I'm doing, but you actually are going to do nothing with this information because you'll just be like, oh, good job. Like you can't tell I'm doing a good job some other way. Like it seems ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. And I think the irony here is that the effect is exactly the opposite of what the employer wants, right? Like at the end of the day, you want to make progress against your business priorities and you want to get the sort of software written, but some of these sort of inefficiencies just cause that to take even longer. And so I'm a huge believer in put the guardrails in place, build the internal platforms that you need to. There's a lot of tooling, including ours, that helps you kind of do it now, and then get out of the way of the developer, let them sort of focus on coding and innovating. And frankly, in our industry right now, fast movers have the advantage. It's no longer sort of the case where you can afford to not innovate rapidly. And we're seeing that all around us.
Mark, are you seeing that also? You're shaking your head. I know Edgevana works more on the infrastructure side. Are you seeing that as well? Because that's that usually is the first thing that has to happen in order for like the engineers to be able to have access to resources, do what they need to do, right? People, what are you seeing on your side?
Yeah, it's really across the board, right? It's super easy because I have an IT background, so it's super easy to talk about IT technologists or true engineers, and the impact. But I think the frustrating part, and this applies, right? If you're an engineering manager and you happen to be watching this, or you're for an HR manager and you happen to be watching this, I hope you get the same kind of value out of this. But what's been known for decades. I'm going to back up even from that statement. There are a lot of things that we've known for decades. We've known for decades that taking naps in the afternoon is actually good. How many companies offer naps in the afternoon for their employees?
No idea, but I know that I worked at a company where we had a Chinese exchange student and she napped during the middle of the day and people looked at her like she was an alien. Like, what is she doing? Exactly. She's literally just took a power nap at her desk and then would get back on it and cranked.
It's pretty much accepted that cubicles are a bad idea. Yep. How many companies still have cubicles?
Well,
right?
It maximizes square footage, Mark. They got to maximize that square footage.
That's right. And it's short-sighted, right? It's using the wrong incentive in your effort to try to improve the company. And it's, pound or penny wise, pound foolish. And avoiding improving how your customers and your employees can interact with your systems more efficiently and more pleasantly is an enormous missed opportunity. Whether you're Walmart and you have an interface to how you sell your products, or you're an engineering firm that insists that everybody fill out 500 values in Jira every single time they update something, or whether you're somebody that has a Salesforce window that has 50 fields that the salesperson is supposed to fill out for every contact they make, you're missing the forest for the trees, right? And there are studies that have been done since before the aughts, and certainly since then, that have showed that productivity it's not exponentially impacted, but it is impacted more than the linear availability or performance of a system would indicate, right? So in other words, if you and I, Preeti and I, are both working on the same system, and I have 20% slower performance than she does, I'm not just 20% less productive during the time that we're both in that. I might be 50 or 60% less productive than she is, because it has an exponential impact, exactly because of the example that you gave about your wife, right? So what did your wife do? So are you going to tell me that every time she went and got a cup of coffee, that coffee only took exactly the amount of time it took for that file to open?
No.
And let's not even talk about the wasted time waiting for the file, regardless of whether coffee occurred.
Yeah.
So when you have an environment,
the computer was literally frozen. It would spin there because it's like accessing the resource, confirming that you are who you say you are. Because I get it. It's a secure file. It's got a company's financials in there, like insider trading, like a lot of regulations are in place. I get it. But it should have happened faster. Right.
But in the end, you find ways to fill the void, right?
Correct.
I mean, if I'm watching TV, what do I do during the commercials?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's what happens all day when your work tools aren't what you would consider to be successful or pleasant to work in. And as you've already said, as Preeti already said, and I would wholeheartedly agree with, people want to be able to feel like they're productive when they're working. And if they can't get that, they're going to go somewhere else where they can find it.
So Preeti, let's talk a little bit about, you guys, Mark, we've all discussed this. We agree that this is changing the way people think about what work is and how they want to experience work. From a senior side, though, from a manager side, from a person who is responsible for the performance of your team, how do you go about evaluating performance capability in the modern day? Because I agree with both of you. Like, no one really wants to be monitored, yet you are responsible for the performance of your team, right? Like, so, we'll start with Preeti, because I think you have like a massive engineering base that has to report to you. Someone's going to say like, hey, how is this person doing? You got to tell them something. Like,
yeah,
they're doing great. They're doing bad. How's it going?
Yeah, no, that's a great topic, Albert. I think, fundamentally, the principle we follow is engineers have the right intent. They want to do good work, and they are here because they believe in our vision, our charter, our open source ethos, and the work we're doing in building the products and tooling, right? So with that principle in mind, the way that we kind of assess performance is we essentially kind of set these quarterly roadmaps and goals, and we look at, were we able to achieve what we set out to do? If not, sort of what came up? Because let's face it, we live in a very fluid environment. Things come up, right? So we're not dogmatic about our goals, but we certainly sort of set these targets, and then we're assessing against them and taking into account, what else might have sort of come up that impacted the work that did get done. And honestly, at the end of the day, we really believe that engineers take pride in shipping software, right? Like we at Hashicorp, within engineering, we constantly are asking ourselves, why are we here? We are here because we want to build great software. And how do we just enable our engineers to build that? And then, definitely we need to assess how we did against that. But for the most part, we really just try and set the roadmaps and kind of get out of the way. One other thing I wanted to just really quickly touch on,
Yeah.
Albert, is, we've talked about tooling quite a bit, but we also believe that the process and the culture of how remote work gets done is really important. And I know last time we talked a little bit about the writing culture we have here. And since then, we've actually shared more publicly we have a site called How Hashicorp Works. And so, if you kind of look at that writing culture, how it manifests in engineering is we write RFCs and they go out to a list, and you kind of go on this list and you just see all the RFCs that have gone out, and you're like blown away with how much work is happening and just getting shared so transparently as well.
What is an RFC?
It's something, RFC stands for request for comments, and it's like a technical document that sort of outlines what problem we're going to solve, how we're going to solve it, and it sort of is written as a project or a feature area is getting spun up.
It's like an idea board of all the things that people want to build, solve, or create.
Sort of. In the olden, we used to have these things called like design documents and functional specs and so on. And so This is sort of an iteration of that.
Oh, that is pretty cool.
She meant to say when Mark was young.
That's really awesome. The idea that you want, I love that and I agree. I think no amount of tooling can change the culture, right? It's the tooling and the culture both have to match up. Like if you have bad tools but a great culture, people feel bad. But if you also have the vice versa, there's something missing there too. So like your culture has to be there. One of the things that I think about hearing the two of you talk about is this idea that engineers want to build great things. I'm curious, does for Hashicorp, we'll start there. Does Hashicorp publicly state when things are going to be done before engineers, basically before engineering gets to say like when things are going to be done? I'm curious on that subject.
We do, and actually think about it in multiple layers. One is, we have our annual conferences, and we'll talk at these conferences about not just sort of what we've achieved, but also a little bit sort of forward looking, what we're looking at next. And then on our open source tooling as well, we've started sort of getting into this rhythm of publishing kind of what's coming down, what's coming next as well. And finally, on the enterprise software side, very often customers will kind of ask us for roadmaps. And so we do have, we do give some visibility into sort of what's next on our radar as well.
No, that makes sense. So the reason why I asked that is because that oftentimes a publicly declared timeline will put a level of pressure on engineers that they'll feel. I think that's part of every engineering job. I think there's probably no company that's like, hey, you can create something when you create it. Like you have to, typically there's time is a factor. And as we're having this discussion, I would start thinking about all the things that companies need to do to make their employee experience better. One of the things that companies do embark on is developing their own software. If they have a problem, if there's no product market fit, they make something for themselves to say, this is going to be our solution. We know that there's many micro internal software. Like the bigger the company, the more there is. Like someone built a little app or a config that does this. And we even see this in ERP implementations, right? ERPs, CRMs, they're all highly, highly configurable. They come out of the box. They're able to do specific things. But wait, what do companies want to do? Like, I want to customize the workflow. I want to do this. I want to do that. And they usually make some type of internal adjustments. How do you see this unfolding in regards to how fast things are changing? Do you think the next wave of work tools are going to be built from inside companies, or do you think vendors from the outside are still going to be the ones that come up with the big ideas that transform the way we do things? Mark, I'll start with you because you have an interesting seat because you sit working with so many different companies.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a perfect answer. I'd love to pick one thing, but I think what's likely to occur over the next 5 years is we're actually going to see an explosion of new applications internal to organizations, unique to those organizations because of low code and no code, right? If I would guess, I don't want to speak for Preeti, but I imagine if we were having a conversation about low code and no code 4 or 5 years ago, she would have said, yeah, it's no big deal. It's too immature. There's really nothing you still have to be a real developer to make something with it. You have to understand too much about architecture to make something work and how it would use storage and all, security and all that kind of stuff. Well, literally, there's been more improvement in low code and no code in the last year than there was in the previous 5 years.
Yeah.
And that's not going to slow down. And so companies are going to have to figure out frameworks, because this becomes sort of the equivalent of accepted shadow IT, for lack of a better description. And companies are going to have to figure out how to incorporate those developments into their framework for security, for license management, for maintaining applications, how they fit into, like you were talking about, ERP apps. How many of those apps are going to end up being like the access databases that people were creating in the 90s and connecting to ERP, supplying data to ERP? And then when that marketing person left, who takes care of that application? Who takes care of that little database that's on somebody's 486 PC? Well, that proliferation is going to become a problem for organizations, but it also creates an enormous opportunity for companies to build things that really offer them differentiation, and to build them for the little things, right? Another thing that I think Preeti would probably agree with is that whether it's a tool like Hashicorp, or a tool like public cloud, or a tool like Mark's Edgevana, the goal is to lower the barrier to entry to getting what you're going to do next started.
Yeah.
That's the whole goal. Because if Amazon makes it easy enough for you to develop on their environment, if Hashicorp makes it easy enough to own and manage infrastructure and cloud installations, if Mark Thiele makes it easy enough for you to buy new data center locations or deploy global networks or deploy global bare metal as a service, then you're likely to do it for more objectives than you otherwise would, because everything is about ROI. And if you lower the barrier to entry, you are lowering the cost of entry, right? And so there's likely to be an explosion of applications, because people will be able to create an application in a few hours that solves a problem for only 5 people in the organization, where historically it never would have been worth assigning a coder to work on it.
So your story there, before I pass the ball to Preeti, is super relevant. We had some of the low code, no code companies on our show, and one of them talked about how one of the major airlines, it was not the developers, it was not the engineers, it was not the CTO, it was not the CIO. It was the baggage handlers on the ground figured out a way to get that information better so they could find lost luggage. So their like lost luggage receipt ticket system was transformed by the baggage handlers and the gate agents who, right. If you've ever lost baggage, you have to go to the office. It's usually got a massive line. Yep. They ask you to, they scan your bag tag. They used to write it down on a piece of paper. They write it down on a piece of paper. And then I think they handed that ticket to the luggage guy, go find this.
Yeah. Very, very reminiscent of the sloth behind the desk at the DMV, right? I mean, it's very, very reminiscent of that.
Yeah.
Cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, yeah. So I couldn't believe it. I was like, what do you mean the baggage handlers themselves figured out? I was like, they knew the process, but it was the first time they had the tools to be like, well, if you gave me this here while I'm on the ground in my terminal in my hand, I would be able to identify it much faster.
Right.
Because he was saying they have to scan it twice off the plane and then at central loading. It's like, but the is a very simple thing. The data did not come as they scanned it. So it would have to go to central loading.
Yep.
Yeah, Albert, you reminded me of this story. My bag loss story is there was one time we were flying to Delhi, and our bag got lost, and then we were going to another remote place. And so our bag showed up 4 days later, and it was delivered on one of those tuk-tuks. So
yeah.
that was kind of the tech gap story. But anyway, kind of going back to, I agree. I think, when Mark was sort of talking about the explosion, this reminded me of my first few weeks at Yahoo, what I inherited was spreadsheets worth of tools that had been written where there was nobody at Yahoo any longer, yet they were used in production. And so, the first kind of couple quarters was like an exercise in archaeology, right? So but I agree, it's going to happen. And I think the lesson that I've learned is embrace it and put a little bit of structure around it. So for instance, with a tool like Terraform and the concept of infrastructure as code, can you at least have everything in GitHub where you've got pointers to what's being deployed, what's running? Can you at least connect everything with a tool like Console where you've got a service registry that tells you where everything is running, right? So kind of put enough of the guardrails where you're embracing this explosion of applications, yet you're doing it in a way where when there is a security incident, you can track things down. When an engineer leaves, you know what needs to be transitioned, right? And, kind of a little bit of insight into how we are kind of applying those lessons here, right? I'd mentioned that part of my role is also running IT here. And one of our sort of strategic initiatives is to use Terraform to do IT, right? So anything that needs automation, we want to just Terraform it. And so we'll have kind of a record in GitHub around kind of what's going on, and hopefully sort of learn the lessons from the past and sort of, reap some benefits as this explosion happens here.
So that goes back to, and this is the constant, I guess, chicken or egg, cart or horse. It doesn't matter what the conversation is or the analogy is, but we agree people are going to innovate fast. We agree that people want to move fast and they have great intentions. And we also agree that at the top, someone wants to control or oversee this. so Preeti, how do you begin? You kind of mentioned embrace it. But if you could give advice to someone who was listening to you and saying okay, my organization's starting to get big. My developers are starting to build not only products for customers, but they're actually building tooling for us just to work better. I want to start to keep track of it. Give me a recommendation. What are some things that you would say to that new tech leader? Hey, this is a good system to use. You kind of mentioned before that you're using Terraform for scripting into GitHub, but that's your application. I'd love to hear some of the other strategies you're deploying to make sure you understand, just your ecosystem, the Hashicorp ecosystem I'm not talking about consumer products, I'm talking about internal projects.
Yeah, I think my number one advice there is to create a small internal platforms team and charter that team with making the engineers successful in kind of the proliferation of this apps and tooling that's going to happen, right? And so what that internal platform team can do is create sort of a self-service environment where they can use tooling like ours or others, right? Where getting a cloud environment is really easy, but it happens through sort of a layer where what's happening and you can just kind of track it and you can clean up after and so on, right? So that sort of notion of that internal platform, and it can be as sort of simple or complex as kind of the needs of the company, but just, putting that focus on your employee experience and actually putting some resources behind making that employee experience being world-class and using the tooling that does exist. I think that goes a really long way in embracing this, in making your employees productive, in hopefully retaining more and kind of answering back against sort of that great resignation. I'd say definitely think about that internal platforms org.
No, that's a good point. Mark, when you think about the same thing, the same challenge, typically the more enterprise it goes, the more control they want, especially to especially in non-software companies. I know they say every company is going to be a software company, but like, like if my business is, I'm $1 billion cookie business, like I might not be a software company yet. I sell cookies at retail. You know what I mean? Like, but those organizations tend to want to, I feel like they want to control more things. I'd love to, because you tend to, I think, work with a lot of these as your customers, or, give us an idea of how they're going to go about it, because they do the same thing as I know, because one of my clients was a big time cookie maker. Them, $1 billion cookie brand. They have a couple of them, but like, if you wanted to do anything internally regarding software, Preeti, I'm telling you, like it wasn't like the way you described it. It was not like that at all. Give us an idea, Mark, of how they're going to have to deal with this, because they want great talent too. They want great talent too. And you guys both said it. Like, if you make it hard for me to work for you, I'll work for someone else. Yeah,
there are a number of things that Preeti said that I thought were incredibly important, and so I'm just going to try to add to that panoply of things that are really required. And I am probably getting almost to the point of boring to people that have heard me more than 5 or 6 times talk about this, but when we watch the 49ers lose, and they lose 4 or 5 times in a row, do we blame the running back? Do we blame the tight end, or do we blame the coach?
You blame the coach,
right? Who gets fired when a team doesn't make it to the Super Bowl too many times? Right,
the coach or the general manager, yeah, right. Or sometimes both.
Right, and yet all too often in organizations, we batter the people at the end of the chain as if every person on a team somehow has failed. And what in reality is that the math of a team of even 4 people, where the whole team failed because of all 4 of those people only, the math is astronomical. The problem is the leader. And so if you don't establish the environment of trust, of give and take, of by example, of the appropriate reward systems, then you're likely an organization that is looking for control. And control is like the mirage on the hot highway in front of you. You keep driving towards it and you never get to that water.
You get it.
You never get to it. And all you end up doing is measuring things that have almost zero impact on your customer satisfaction, on your profitability, on the growth of your company. And they serve to increase turnover, which is just an additional negative impact on your revenue, on your bottom line, and on your customer. And I could preach on this for hours, but a good friend of mine, Jonathan Feldman, CIO for Asheville, we were talking about this over Twitter a few months back, and he made the great example is, and I'm paraphrasing, but effectively, how good will your customer support be if your support agents are the prisoners in the prison, right? And if we're treating our employees like they're the prisoners of our company, what kind of example are we going to set for them that they would set with your customers? And so this idea of control, is a misnomer. I'm a huge believer in a lot of the things that Bill and Dave. I started at HP. I actually had the privilege of meeting Bill and Dave while I was at HP. Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard, for the folks who are too young to remember those 2 giants of the industry. And they had a couple of things that I really loved. One of them was management by walking around, which is a little more difficult when people are all over the world, but the theory still applies. But the other one is that most everyone really wants to do the right thing. They want to be able to do their job. And your best bet is not to cater to the 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 or 1 in 100 who are failures. Your job is to cater to the other 95% that are successful. It's like, it's a great example of when companies are going through tough times and they think they shouldn't tell their employees stuff. Because there might be one person in the company who quits out of outrage or deletes their files or whatever they might do in anger because of this news of an acquisition or divestiture or a future layoff or something, you have decided that every one of your students have to stay after class. Right? One kid throws the eraser, the whole class has to stay after. And that makes no sense from a leadership strategy. Focus your energies on what people do well individually, get them to maximize where they have the most potential instead of spending 80% of your time on a place where they can add 20% value. Spend 20% of your time on a place where they can add 80% value. And the same thing goes to the larger picture. Focus on what the group of people in general are likely to be able to accomplish if you give them fertile ground to work in, instead of targeting the one person who might be an asshole.
No, I like the way you frame that, right? Like you said, why would your support agents do a good job by your customer when they feel like they are imprisoned to you? And like they might have, thoughts about leaving, not interested in solving this problem. They want to get out from under the thumb, all types of things. I want to make this, before we close, because we're running close to the top of the hour, I wanted to ask a more fun, lighthearted question. I'd love for you guys to tell me what someone should build for you. So imagine there's a bunch of engineers listening to this. We've been talking about the employee experience, what it's going to take for a company to retain engineering talent, how they have to develop, how we have to embrace proliferation of technology. Like that's going to happen. That's the new norm. But there's also things that we need or want. And I'd love for you guys to each share, what is something that doesn't exist, because we all work in this new environment. What is something that doesn't exist today that if there's an engineer out there, they're like, I'd love for someone to solve this problem. What problem or what thing would you like? We'll start with Preeti. You got a big team. You got lots of projects going on. What does not exist, or what would you like improved for you?
I think the one piece that stands out for me is how can we build more social connections in a remote environment, right? Like all of us are tired of just getting on a Zoom, right? So I don't know what it is, what shape it would take, but my wish would be that sitting at home, I can connect more socially with team members. And Mark was talking about kind of the walk around piece, right? Like the equivalent of that. How can I just connect with somebody and not leave my study here, right? That's what I want.
Mark, how about yourself? What would you like built for you?
I love the one that Preeti suggested, but I'm going to take one that's even more personal. Is that I will tell anyone that works for me or works with me what my weaknesses are, because my team understands my weaknesses better. They can accommodate those weaknesses, and I can hire to fill those weaknesses. One of my own personal weaknesses, because historically I've always had a really, really good memory, is that I assume that I can go to a long, complex meeting and walk away and remember everything that I'm supposed to do, that other people are supposed to do, that I'm supposed to follow up on. I'm going to remember that because an email popped up an hour ago, that's an email that I don't need to worry about today, but I should worry about tomorrow. I'm going to remember somehow magically all of that stuff. I would love an AI tool that could learn me and accommodate me in all of my weaknesses around the daily activities of keeping my job alive, right? Like the second reminder on another device from my for important meetings from Outlook, or the note that if I ignored it on my phone twice, pops up in a red flashing light or something and says, "What the hell is your problem? Deal with this now." I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but realistically, I really would love to be able to say, because I am not, I could spend all of my energy trying to be better organizationally around those things. And then I would likely fail at the things that I am naturally super good at. And so filling that hole without having to ask someone else to spend hours and hours being bored to death around me so that they could accommodate for me would be awesome.
That would be super cool. And you guys have both hit on my actual my product is a combination of both your products. My product is I need a summarization tool. I need something that can summarize what I have now learned about a customer through phone call, through chats, because how do we communicate with customers out? It's phones, it's chats, it's Zoom, it's virtual, it's email. I need a summary tool that can take in all this information and write a summary for me and give that as my status update on an account, because I can't tell you how much time I spend each day just telling somebody else, writing it up to tell someone else what's going on. So if we had that summarization piece, that'd be so nice. That way you could then, Preeti, before you even get into the Zoom meeting, like Zoom might be a lot more fun if you didn't have to summarize what you were doing.
Yeah, totally. Let me know when you find this tool.
Yeah, same here.
Well, Mark, Preeti, I appreciate you joining us today on IT Visionaries, sharing your experiences and your thoughts on employee experience and what it means during this time period of the Great Resignation. Yeah, there's more power in an engineer's hands than ever to choose. And for a company, if you want to keep great talent, you're going to have to create a great culture. The tools are like, I think you guys kind of said it, the tools aren't nearly as important as the opportunity to build, create, and not feel like you're being, surveillanced or something.